Hi, Wills.
Hello, Josh. How you doing?
Doing well, man. Thanks so much for doing this and making the time today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to not be chopping onions for an hour and a half.
Yeah, right. Whatever I
Yeah.
can do to get you away from that.
Yeah.
So, speaking of chopping onions, how long have you been in the industry?
Um, that's a great question. I guess my first industry job was when I was 14. I worked at the local market on the corner in my neighborhood as the register boy, as the mop guy. So that was my first taste of the F&B world. A little wine and cheese shop right on the corner. I grew up with the owner's son, so it was a natural first job when I decided that I needed some weed money. I uh, knocked on the door and he said, "You start right now." And then that was the first, and then that was my high school years. Then in college, I started, really getting into it and getting the bug for it. So 14, so I'm 36 now. So what is that? 22 years of pretty much full time. There was a stretch when I was 19 that I did valet. So I guess 25 years now. So that's all I know.
So, you mentioned the bug. What was that? What kept you in it?
So the bug, um, it's different to everybody, first and foremost, but it is the realization that this isn't a job, it's a career. And it's when you start really honing in your craft and making it, trying to be, trying to get to that next level and trying to, be the best in the crew and trying to be that leader. And it was really when I was 22. After college, I moved to Los Angeles, California, and I started working at this taco shop. And it was brand new. I started there before they opened, helped them open the place up. Started as a dishwasher. Actually, I started there when I was 21, and then started as dishwasher. Got promoted to line, got promoted to the front, got promoted to AGM, and then when I was 23, I was running this pretty successful taco shop, and we opened up another location with the owner, and I managed both of them, and that was really my first form. It wasn't the power; it was okay. I'm actually pretty good at this. I didn't graduate from college, um, but you know this is a career now, and it was the realization that um, I love making people happy, and a gift and a curse, you could say, but you get the instant feedback, you get the instant gratification in our hospitality industry of you make people happy immediately.
What did you learn in that taco shop that you use today?
Oh, I learned more of what not to do.
That's important.
Yeah, I got promoted way too fast. The owner, it was his first time working in the industry. I was 21. No matter what you want to say, every 21-year-old needs, they're not done growing yet. So he promoted me way too fast, and I learned by trial and error how to trust people, how not to trust people, how to set yourself up for success, how to set yourself up for failure. Um, and then the most important lesson I learned is if you just don't make the same mistake twice in life and in hospitality, you will succeed. And that's really what I learned through trial and error is stop making the same fucking mistake twice, and good things happen.
What mistakes have you made more than once?
Oh God, hiring friends. I think we're all guilty of that. Is um, you know listening to the wrong people. Um, giving somebody I'm all for second chances. I'm done giving third chances. Um, those are the big things. The biggest things I've learned in this as being a leader and a manager and an owner is you're only as good as the people that you surround yourself with. You could have, two all stars and three, mediocre people, and you have a mediocre crew. Um, and that was my big thing as I hone my craft even further and further. I hate to quote the famous YouTuber Gary Vee because, he says a lot of stuff, but listen to one of his podcasts. Is the easiest way to succeed is hire fast and fire fast. If you're not getting a good feeling, just move on. I'd rather be short staffed than overstaffed or perfectly staffed with, a mediocre employee.
When did you feel like a leader? Because if you jump back to that time when you're 21, it's easy to be in a leadership position and kind of think you know what you're doing. But I feel like anybody who's like a true leader, like understands the calling, they kind of have that moment where they sit back and they're like, these folks are listening to me. It's important what I say, how I say it. Was there a time that you can recall where you felt like you had become the kind of leader that you were growing into?
I think it was like the first time I had to fire a 50-year-old dude as a 21-year-old, when you kind of have like that realization, like, okay, this is real. Like, it's all fun and games until you have to fire somebody. And then after the first time I end up firing, his name was Derek. He was the man. He, showed up to work drunk. Came out of the bathroom. I found a beer candy in the bathroom. That situation where it's an obvious fire, and you're like, from that moment on, from that moment on for me, it was like, okay, like I drew a line, 21 years old, drew a line in the sand. You can't cross that line. It was my first realization. The first time I fired somebody was really when I felt like a leader.
What was your relationship with alcohol at that time?
Out of control and euphoric. As a 21-year-old living in Los Angeles, with a little bit of money in my pocket, I felt like a king. It's the parties and my relationship with alcohol from a young age, even at 16, 17 into, my early 20s, was so normalized that I had no idea it was a problem. You surround yourself with, people, and all of a sudden that's your world, and that world's normal, and you don't even consider it's not normal. So, I remember binge drinking and drinking to blackout when I was 17, 16 years old, and everyone did that I surrounded myself with. So it wasn't weird. It wasn't weird at all. It was just what we did. And then getting, deeper into the industry, I don't have to tell you or anybody that, binge drinking is so normalized in this industry that it's a pandemic, epidemic, whatever you want to call it. Even my crew now, they go out after work and, there's always a blackout story, but they're all 26, 27, but my relationship with alcohol has always been, watching my parents get home at 5 and immediately crack a beer when I'm, 9 years old, going to get my dad beers, learning how to open a bottle of wine up when I'm 7 because my parents drink it every day. Like, you don't realize how normal it gets until it's too late and you're like, oh shit. So it's always been, and I've always been the type of drinker that, as cliche as it sounds, one's never enough, and 14 is not enough either. There is no fine line. It's 3 days later, I spent $2,000 on an 8-ball of blow and 3 handles of fucking Tito's, and it's just, I was doing extremely well for myself from 21 to 30. I got sober at 30. Counting up, just going through my W-2s, I probably made $1 million over the course of 10 years at an average of $100,000 a year. I got sober with $800 in my pocket. And at that point I owned a house. Thank God. I had no car payment. And I owned a business. I owned my first taco shop, and I still had $800 in my pocket. And it's every time I got any little bit of money, I was a bar drinker. I wish I was an at-home drinker where I could just, nurse a 6-pack or nurse a 5th, but I was the guy at the bar, shots for everyone. I was the bad guy when it came to money. I had no concept of money. It's, $1,000 in. A cheap weekend was $1,000. I was a mess, and it was cocaine and alcohol, and it was brutal. It was so fun until you look back and you're like, oh my god, that wasn't fun at all. I know what fun is now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
When you're in the grind of it and it's normalized and you're not thinking about it, was there ever like a little leak that shined through the window to kind of show you the other side? I mean, I remember for me, it happened probably 4 or 5 years before I got sober, and I met a sober bartender, and I saw the way that they lived their life. I asked them out for lunch, and I asked them every question under the sun except for about sobriety. And it's so strange to like think back on that lunch where I was like, man, I really could have learned a lot if I would have just asked them what it was like. But it just wasn't time. I wasn't ready. But that was the first kind of glimpse that like maybe what I'm doing isn't fully normal. And that kind of like planted the seed into like start thinking about it. Years down the line, I do become sober. But were there glimmers of a possible life, or did it have to come to a full stop for you?
my road to sobriety was, 1,000 straws on the camel's back. And every single straw, I call it, a rock bottom. It was never truly rock bottom because, I never, my rock bottom and somebody else's rock bottom, they're both rock bottoms, but
I
it can
always said
always
that
be
I never
worse.
hit rock bottom, but I threw a lot of shit down that well.
Yeah, absolutely. I did AA. I got sober September of 2019. So it was fall before COVID. So I embraced AA until COVID hit, and then it turned into Zoom, and I hated it. And I didn't really like AA to begin with, anyways. I loved the concept of AA, but it's not for everyone. There's 1,000 roads to sobriety, and AA happens to be, the major highway, but, there's side streets. And the glimmers of sobriety were, every time I fucked up, every time I woke up and not know where I was, every time I woke up in the drunk tank, which was 7, 8 times in different, every time I woke up in jail, that was okay. This is rock bottom. Nope, it wasn't. I always, it's like the stock market. There's ebbs and flows, and when you're high, and when you're low. And there's always another low coming, and there's always another high coming in sobriety. And the glimmers were never, other than the fact that when I did wake up, when I had $1,000 in my pocket, and then I wake up with nothing, and then it's just like, okay, like you're better than that. And then you get that text message from your favorite drinking buddy, like, hey, meet me at the bar. I'm like, yep. And then it's just, I'm going to do, I'm not going to drink, I'm not going to do McGillicuddy's tonight. I'm not going to do Fireball tonight. It's like, I'm only going to drink Miller Lite tonight. Yep. For the first 4 Miller Lights. And then all of a sudden, here comes a whiskey. You know what I mean? Here it comes. So my sobriety was always, I never even thought I would take sobriety seriously until the last time I got arrested. And I hate to glamorize anything, but I had the best summer of my life. It was the summer of 2019. I had, a big friend group, and, money was good, and it was such a high trajectory that looking back, I should have been like, you should have for sure seen the drop coming. And it was like, then I got arrested September 10th, and then I got sober September 11th, or when I got out of jail, county drunk tank. But yeah, it was, that summer was amazing. And then it was just literally rock bottom. I stopped going to work. I had a great crew. I'd stop, I would check in the morning, and then, it was summer, and then I'd be at the lake at noon on a boat. And it was just one of those summers that, and then it was a perfect last summer of drinking 6 years ago.
Or what are some of the signs that you wished you paid attention to see the drop coming?
I couldn't have a beer without even thinking about cocaine. That should have been, that wasn't, but it was normalized. It was, everyone did it in my circle, but no one does it. But just having that gut, it was like when you need a cigarette, you have that feeling. That should have been like red flag, but it wasn't. It was like, okay. And everyone has this feeling. Avoiding my parents was the biggest thing. Like when they would call me, I would silence them. I would silence their phone. They would invite me over, I'd make up some excuse. I was either hungover or I was at a bar, or even though, they were, my biggest fans and I love them and I have the best relationship with them now, thank God, because of sobriety. It was avoiding the people I love to hang out with people that just wanted to get fucked up. And that was the biggest red. Looking back, it was like I probably went a year that summer, going into the early spring, whatever. Going to my parents live 8 minutes from me. Going to their house once, and just being like, oh, I can't go over there. I gained 40 pounds. Just looking like trash. Thinking I'm having a great time, but slowly killing myself. But yeah, just the feeling of addiction. And then avoiding birthday parties, avoiding situations that I used to love going to. And now, if it's not a blackout drunk scenario, I don't want to go. I just want to hang out at the bar.
How'd you make it stick?
It was the realization that I would lose my business. It was to the point where it's either now or never. Waking up that last time in the drunk tank, I blacked out, and then I woke up in the drunk tank, and they wouldn't tell me what I did for like 6 hours. The jail, prison guards, whatever they're called, COs, wouldn't tell me what I did at all. So I sat there stewing, thinking you think the worst. I drove, I killed somebody, I got arrested with drugs, I got, whatever it was. So I sat there. I'm not a religious man at all. I sat there praying to myself, if I can get out of here with, a slap on the wrist, I will change. And I swear to myself, I will change. And from that moment on, I haven't touched alcohol, haven't touched a cigarette, haven't touched any cocaine. And it was that moment of like, oh my God, I just lost everything, because I normalized. The Patriots were playing that night. And it was, oh, I have to get blacked out. The Patriots are playing. And it was like, that was the tipping point. It's either, okay, like you can be a mediocre guy, or you can just get sober and turn yourself into, what you've always wanted to be, which is, nothing special, just a normal guy running a taco shop, with some great friends. And that's all I wanted. And I knew I couldn't do that with alcohol and anything else. It's black or white with me. I had to quit. I became vegan for 2 years. I stopped eating meat because I just blew up. Eating, chicken tenders every single night of the week because that's the only thing you want to eat at the bar. Just, I blew up and I became vegan for 2 years. And then, I'm still obviously sober and cigarette free, but some people just have to have that. It's not a come to Jesus moment if you're not religious, but it's a come to, you got to make a deal with yourself. It's either, I hate the word loser, but be a loser or be a normal guy. And that was my final straw.
What those early days feel like, obviously if you're living such a kind of like hard and fast lifestyle like that, surrounded by folks that are doing similar things, like, did you have to avoid certain people, certain places? Like, how did you start to grow out of that guy?
I cut off everyone. It probably wasn't the healthiest cold turkey I ever did, but I had a girlfriend at the time. She lived at my house here. My parents live in Florida and Maine, going back and forth. So my parents' house was empty. So I left my girlfriend probably, a week or two after I got sober because she wasn't on the same. That relationship was part of my old life. So I moved into my parents' house, and I became a hermit. I would go to work. I'd work 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, and I became an unhealthy work addict. But that's what I needed to do. I'd leave for meetings, and I would leave, and that's it. And then the early days, I thought, if I don't dive in, I'm never going to do it. And I tried, some people can, there's 1,000 ways to be sober. And the easiest way for me was to turn my phone off for the first week and dive into work and, and think what can be, what is possible. And that was really it. It was cut off. I still haven't seen people from 6 years ago that I thought were my best friends. And I had such a great group of friends. And I still, if I saw them today, I would, I'd hug them and we would laugh and we would cry and we would shoot the shit about the good old days. But we don't text anymore. We don't call anymore. And, I realized 90% of my relationships were around, alcohol and the bar scene life. And I'm fine with that. That was the life I chose to live. And the 10% of people that are here with me now from back then are everything I ever need and ever wanted. I had too much fun, and, here I am now.
Did sobriety seem sustainable back then? When you dive in to work and all that, did it seem like this is worth it?
I tell everyone, obviously the restaurant business is big on, drinkers and sobriety. Portland, Maine is a huge, sobriety center, sober houses everywhere, great community. I tell everyone I try to hire we work with a couple sober houses. We hire a lot of sober people, but I tell everyone, the first 3 months are the easiest. They are, looking back, it's, you're riding the adrenaline of something new and something, I can do this and I'm a new person and I'm better than I used to be. And you have this feeling that it's over and I'm doing something better with my life. And then, 3, 4, 5, 6 months roll by and you get in the routine of life and it's not new anymore. It's not exciting anymore. And that's when the real work kicks in. And that's when you have the feeling, oh, I can have a beer. I'm sober now. I figured it out. I don't have a problem. And I never slipped back because I had, a choice and I made the choice. But, on your first birthday after a year sober, yes, I had the feeling what, I should have a beer tonight. And, no, I shouldn't. I woke up the next day and, thank myself for this situation and choosing the thing that I did. But, the early days were the easiest. And now I feel like year two was the hardest for me. It's when, work was good. I thought I was good. And I'm like, okay, now what do I do? The early days I always thought were the easiest. And I'm sure everyone, obviously once you get through the detox of the shakes, and not that I was that bad, but once you get through the first week, it's oh yeah, I can do this forever. And then it's mundane. You have to work at it every day. And
what's the work start to look like, or what did it look like for you once life started to mellow out a bit?
Once life started to mellow out a little bit, work. So 6 months after I got sober, COVID hit. And that's really when I became the version of myself I think I am now. It's when I met my wife, Emily. We've been together for 5 years now and married for 3 or 2. But that was the moment of realization that good things did come. And you have to, when you're in sobriety, you have to know when you get a win, because that's the biggest thing. It's when you go to that birthday party and you have a good time, and you don't drink is a win. Like I've been to a bunch of birthday parties and not have a good time sober. And I think that's a loss. I'm like, why didn't I have fun? Everyone had fun. Like I didn't have fun. And then, when you go on that early morning hike or that morning walk, and that's a win. Be like, I never would have done this. Realizing what you would have done and not would have done, I consider the little wins of sobriety. It's popping into my parents' house or going to visit my nieces on a random Friday night at 7 to have dinner. It's like that is such a win to me, and just realizing that never would have happened. I would have been on the same bar stool at the same bar telling the same stories, and just those are the little wins that people in sobriety have to realize. It's not always going to be the biggest crossing the finish line, I'm a gold medal champion win feeling, but it's looking in your bank account and not even caring that your car just broke down and you're like, yeah, okay, it's $500. Like that's the little win. I have $500 now. Like I wouldn't, 6 years ago. So yeah, that's my big thing is understanding what little wins are and using that as momentum to find the next little win.
How does that make you feel thinking about those little things? Because those are certainly the things that you were avoiding. Those are the calls that you were silencing. Those are the people that you weren't seeing. Like, how do you feel being there now?
I feel like an actual member of my family and not an outsider looking in. I mean, for years I went to college in Florida, then in California. So I was always a little on the outside with my family. We were tight. We'd FaceTime and, we were extremely close, but I never felt involved. And even when I moved home, I didn't feel involved because I'd go over there twice a week for 45 minutes and, we'd shoot each other text messages. And I never felt like I was in the inner circle. I always felt like I was not being judged because they would never judge me, but, not living up to their potential was, the biggest. I knew that. I'm self-aware enough to realize that, people that love you also judge you because they have this expectation of who you are and you're not living up to it. So it might not be called judging, but it's definitely, you're disappointing people. And knowing I'm not disappointing anyone anymore with my actions is the greatest sense of relief. You go to bed happy, you wake up happy, knowing that you're just trying your best and to be what you want to be. You want to be a family man, you want to be a good friend, you want to be somebody that comes to you for advice, and you never got that before because nobody wanted to put up with your shit before. So that was how I feel now compared to then, is I feel involved naturally without any effort. Like they call me, if they need a ride. They would never call me if they needed a ride before. They'd call me to pick them up. Now they call me to pick them up at the airport. They would never do that before. They'd be like, oh, he's either hungover or drunk. Like, nice guy, and now I'm the guy that, shows up every single time, on time, no excuses. So it's one of those things where you don't really know what the benefits are of sobriety until you live it and you experience people relying on you more. And you're like, where were you 6 years ago? Like, I would never, yeah. What do you mean? You were here. I was here. I was calling somebody else. So it's one of those things where it's another little win. It's being involved and reliable is my favorite thing about sobriety.
How did work change for you? Did you view yourself as a different kind of leader?
Yes and no. Work was always work with me. I've always been extremely hardworking, extremely, forward thinking with work. But again, I was more clear headed. I'm waking up at 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock, being at the shop first. Now I'm leaving last. I'm not, I didn't get the text message, hey, meet me at the bar, so I have no the leader, again, more involved, more reliable. I had a great crew. I thank God I could, manage enough people that wanted to be around me when I was, at my worst. I was still a great guy, I think, anyways. But yeah, no, I never think I changed like personality wise inside the restaurant. I'm sure I did, and I'm sure people see me more now, and I'm not hungover anymore. But I either think just being involved and realizing, sobriety isn't the answer. It doesn't make you a better person. You have to be, if you're a bad person when you're using, you're going to be a bad person when you're not using. There's nothing changes. So that's what I think about that.
Yeah. I always used to think that like I became somebody else like when I decided to get sober. But the more that I look at it now, it looks like I just have been working to pull all the good parts through. And I was able to kind of like leave behind, let everything else sort of like wash off and get to discover like the little intricacies of myself that I enjoyed from childhood and maybe like haven't like dusted off since then. Who do you feel like you pulled through in these last 6 years?
Pulled through like what did I pull through for
Yeah.
myself?
Yeah. Who, like, what of you that you enjoy of yourself made it through this?
I like what you just said, leaving things behind and then realizing what is left. I think is extremely well put and extremely enlightening. It's life isn't a party, and you have to come to that realization at some point. And that party person of putting everything off and realizing tomorrow doesn't exist, and now it's the complete opposite. It's putting nothing off, and all you think about is tomorrow. So, what I pulled, how I vision that question is, why I became sober, and it's to do myself a favor. Is sobriety is a selfish thing. It's all about you. It's if you don't care about how it affects you, if you're doing it for your spouse or if you're doing it for anything else, you're never gonna get there. You have to. It's a it's a lonely journey. You can surround yourself with as many sober people as possible, but they aren't going to be around when you want to crack that beer open, because you're not going to crack the beer open at AA. It's realizing, being selfish with sobriety, and you don't have to go to that event if you don't want to, and you don't have to, if you don't, I hated going to the gas station before because I'd always buy a pack of butts, so I'd always run on E, and I'm like, I can't go to the gas station. I want a cigarette. So it's like realizing what is worth it and what's not worth it is my favorite thing to come from sobriety. It's some things are worth it and some things aren't worth it. And sobriety just makes everything so clear that, there's only a couple things in the world that matters. It's take care of your family, take care of yourself. Everything else is fine. And if you can't take care of yourself, can't take care of your family, sobriety is an issue.
What do you do for fun?
Oh, what do I do for fun? I hang out with my dog Oki, who's on the couch right here. Hi, Oki. My wife Emily. We have a gym in our basement. We work out together all the time, which is a great. I have two little nieces that are 3 and 5 years old who live in my town, who I'm extremely involved with, and my sister is my best friend, and we hang out all the time. And I golf. I didn't golf for the first year or two from sobriety because what do you do on the golf course? You drink and you smoke, and that was one thing that took me 2 summers to come to the realization. I used to bowl. I used to be a huge bowler. I haven't been to the bowling alley one time since I used to go 3 nights a week. That was like, it was an excuse to drink, excuse to have fun, but I was super into it. that was a hobby that I know once I stepped into that bowling alley, like that was my trigger. So I stopped doing that. But golf um, is a big hobby of mine. Working out's a big hobby of mine. Reading, just I'm a boring man these days, and I'm completely happy with that.
It's funny that you say that because I mean, I feel like I would have said something very similar, but it's like if you would have asked me 8 years ago what I do for fun, like I did one thing. I did one thing in a lot of different places, and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was drinking. Like that was the main thing. And if I was going to go do something where drinking wasn't there, like I'd find a way to bring it in. Like I could label it
Absolutely.
as many ways as I want to, but I
Yeah.
did one thing. And like you just listed like five and you're like, "Oh, not much." Like that fills that fills some days on a calendar.
Oh, for sure. And like you said, it's what I do back then. I drank. What were my favorite things to do? I used to love going to the lake, aka drinking. Used to love playing golf, aka drinking. Used to love going bowling, aka drinking. Used to love going camping, aka drinking. So like all of my hobbies were completely just excuses to get belligerent and realizing and back to normalizing stuff. It's you have to realize some things you think are normal are not normal. And if you just say that out loud to yourself, a couple times, it's like, yeah, you're right. Like, this is not normal. Like, and it was just, I haven't openly talked about sobriety in so long because I don't go to meetings anymore. I talk to a couple people, a couple friends, but we don't get in depth like this. So it's looking back, in hindsight, I haven't done in a long time. So this is fun.
Yeah, it's even interesting to kind of talk about it. I mean, 6 years is, no small piece of change there. Like I'll be at 8 in October, and it's like the way
Congrats.
that
That's
I
incredible.
talked about sobriety in like year 1 or 2, like feels so drastically different to like how I talk about it now. Like, do you feel like you're sort of like aging into different levels of sobriety?
I don't, but people that I surround myself do. I'm getting a lot more. We have two restaurants or three restaurants now. One, catering, commissary, kitchen. But people bring me aside all the time, and they want to learn why or how, or they're 2 months sober, just out of the sober house, or just in the sober house, and they come up to me. They want to hear my story, and I tell them the same thing. Do you want to be sober? And they're like, well, yeah. Like, I was like, who do you want to be sober for? And if they don't say myself first, I immediately stop it. I'm like, nope. Like, it's not because your girlfriend. It's not because you're PO. It's not because, you you got to be sober to live in your sober house. It's, so I feel like the same person that I was 4 years ago, not 6 years ago. Year one sober me was pretty not miserable, but
Going through
I,
it.
oh yeah, you isolate yourself and you feel like, um, you know, if you go to a restaurant, you're gonna drink, so you avoid everything. If I go to a birthday party, I'm gonna drink. So you don't trust yourself. So I self isolated, and it could have ended bad. It could have ended. It could have been a whole different path of whatever that path would have been. But I definitely feel like there comes a point in sobriety where, like, I hate even calling myself sober now because, like, I just don't drink anymore. I don't do drugs anymore. I'm not sober. I'm an addict, and will always be. Because we were, but the word sober has this, like, it's it's a positive connotation, but it's also a connotation. It's, oh yeah, he's in sobriety. Like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah, it
Like,
makes you feel broken.
right? It's like, yeah, I had a problem, but like I fixed it, so now I don't. So like, what do you call that person? So like, it's one of those things where I did not. I'll always be worried about slipping, obviously, because I know, it's that's the easy way. Being being an addict is easy. It really is. Just do whatever the fuck you want. Not being an addict is hard. You have to stay focused. But at the same time, there comes a point where you have to accept that this is your new normal. And no matter what happens, you are who you are. And, I hate being labeled as, somebody that's sober, but, I take it as a badge of honor sometimes. And sometimes I take it as, fuck you, dude. Like, I'm not sober. I just don't drink. So I go in waves of how I feel about that.
How do you feel about people labeling you drunk?
6 years ago, I would have taken it as a compliment and been like, yeah, man. Like, but, that's just who I was. And back to being self-aware, you have to be self-aware. I was never in denial. I would be the first person to tell you that, I'm going to black out tonight. I was that type of person. Like, yeah, I'm going to get fucked up tonight. But someone calling me drunk now, I'd laugh at them and say, you should have saw me 6 years ago.
I know it is kind of funny though, because I feel like I take more issue with like being called sober than I did being called drunk.
Yeah, I completely agree, because one, like you said, one means you're broken, one means you need to be fixed, and one just says you like to have fun.
I like that you said life's not a party, because it made me think that like of all of the times that I tried to make it one, and like the crash out would just be like so much more upsetting, because you think like, why can't it be fun all the time? You try to manufacture it, and it's like it's not meant to be, so it will never feel the way you want it to. And it made me like think about how my mom will like plan Christmas and then spend all the time worrying about why Christmas isn't perfect.
Yep.
Instead of just enjoying the parts of like Christmas that will feel perfect if you just let them like ride out.
Yeah, that's sober in a nutshell. It's, you have these expectations of how it's going to make you feel and how it's going to fix all your problems. But, there's the saying, wherever you go, there you are. And, if you hate yourself sober, chances are you're not going to flip a switch and love yourself. If you hate yourself drunk, you're not going to love yourself sober. There's more work to be done. And it's a weird road, and it's not for everyone. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. If you just, so once COVID hit and, AA kind of fell off, there's this Reddit subthread called Stop Drinking. And they have a saying, it's, I will not drink today. That's it. That's like their one, I will not drink today. And I got so deep into that subreddit. I'd read everyone's stories. I would comment. I was involved in that little community there for a minute, but I got so into the saying, I will not drink today. For the first, year, I'd wake up, I will not drink today. It's, don't worry about tomorrow. You nailed yesterday. Don't worry about next week. Don't worry about that, Christmas party you have in 2 months that I would dread. But today, I will not drink today. And that made sobriety simple for the first, couple months. It was, today I cannot drink. I'm going to be asleep again in 18 hours. Like, all I got to do is just not drink for 18 hours. Like, so that was kind of my window to, not AA, but having a little community, during those first couple months of COVID where, I had nothing to grab onto because I didn't want to listen to people's stories on Zoom. And I got more from AA and that Reddit subthread, reading about people and listening about people than talking myself, because other people I always thought were smarter than me, in everything. If you think you're the smartest one in the room, you're not. And, listening to other people was more therapeutic for me than talking myself, because I wasn't gaining any knowledge talking. I was spewing what I thought was knowledge, but I wanted to hear, what, Brian down the street, how he got sober 32 years ago, in the middle of the 80s, when nobody was getting sober. Like, he has way more information to give me than I can give him. So it was one of those things where I got so much from listening and reading about other people's problems that made me realize I can do it. And if they can do it, their rock bottom was living in an alleyway, not eating scraps, and they bounced back. And I'm just so thankful and lucky to have the family and friends that I had. That it's just, in retrospect, it's just amazing.
What do you love about yourself?
Oh, I love my sense of humor. I love the fact that I'm relied upon and depended upon. I take great pride in that. I love, my common sense. I think growing up how I did, in the era that we did. How old are you?
I'm 37.
Yeah, you're 30. Yeah, so growing up before the age of the internet and, being out without a cell phone and having a little bit more freedom when you're 10, 11, 12, 13, and when your parents would let you go wherever you wanted to go. You get this kind of little street smartness to you, and I really enjoy how that rubbed off on me even nowadays. I'm so glad we grew up before the smartphone, before the internet. It was a blessing for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, Wills, you've got an awesome story, man. Thank you for sharing it.
Hey, thank you very much for this platform, and keep doing what you're doing, man. It's incredible. It's listening. Some people don't want to talk. Some people just want to listen, and this is the perfect platform for that.